Do you feel like you spend more time fixing an AI's reply than it would have taken to write it yourself? That happens because most people give instructions in a way that doesn't match how these models process information. In this video, I'll explain what prompting is and why mastering it can save you time and frustration in your work. I'll also walk you through a simple two-step framework that I've created, which you can download and you can print and you can refer to it as you're writing your own prompts. And at the end, I'm going to give you some extra for expert tips that I use in my everyday to make my prompting more efficient and effective. If you're new here, my name is Quinton Hiini, and this episode is part of our Q AI for Business series, which I created based on a real-world experience leading global digital transformations and helping organizations get real value from AI. So first off, let's just define what prompting is. So at its essence, prompting is writing clear instructions or prompts so that the AI model knows how to produce useful outputs for you. So if you're using it at work, you can be more efficient with your time and make sure that you're getting business-ready results. Another way to look at prompting is using the language of AI. And so the reason it's important to use the language of AI is because typically in a work context, you're working on quite complex workflows. And so you need to be able to structure the information in a way that the AI knows how to process it properly. So to help with this, I've created a two-step framework which you can use to help reference and make sure that the prompts you're creating have the right level of detail. And in fact, you can print this out and you can put it next to your computer and reference it as you're writing your prompts. So this framework is broken down into two parts. The first is about making sure that you had all the details that you need in the context so that you're going to get the right outputs. And the second part is about evaluating and going through and iterating the outputs that you get. So first off, let's focus on the first part, which is about the context. So the key bits of information that you should include when you're writing prompts, particularly for work, are persona, the context, the instructions, and the format. So when we're talking about persona, what we mean is what kind of persona do you want the AI to take on? For example, you might want it to take on the persona of a legal advisor, or a content writer, or a marketing expert, or anything like that, right? But if you give it some clarity around what kind of persona you want it to take on, it's going to shape the way that it outputs your work. Second is about context. So context is super important. An important thing to know here is that while AI is a super useful tool, it's not a mind reader. And so it doesn't understand the nuances of your situation or the details that you might take for granted. So when you're prompting, you want to make sure that you're including the right level of context so that it understands where you're coming from and what you're trying to achieve there. The next is being super clear on what the instructions are. So what specifically are you asking the AI to do? Are you asking it to generate a report? Are you asking it to be a thought partner? Are you asking it to critically assess the work that you're doing? All of these kind of things, right? It's just very important that you're clear on what kind of work you want it to do on your behalf. And then the last one is about format. So how do you want this presented? Do you want it in bullet points? Would you like it in a diagram? Are you wanting it as a script for a video? Or perhaps you want it for a legal presentation or something like that. If you make sure that you're covering the persona, the context, the instructions, and the format, that really gives you the parameters, or gives the AI the parameters it needs to make sure that what it's delivering is really going to be useful for you. And the idea is, if you think about these things at the beginning, you save a lot of time without having to go backwards and forwards. Without these things, sometimes you get really vague answers and then you go down rabbit holes and it can be quite ineffective. So if you think of these things up front at the beginning, it's going to help you save a little bit more time and your results are going to be more targeted. And so the second part is about checking and iterating. It gives you your first draft, but you want to make sure that you're evaluating, making sure that it's meeting the goal that you actually want. And you also want to validate any facts that are in there. And the way that AI models work, it's based on probability. And so sometimes you get what are called hallucinations. And so it's really important that there are important facts or data points in there. You want to make sure that you're validating and making sure that they're correct. And so a very easy way of doing that is just asking for sources. And then once you've gone through and you've evaluated and you've validated the facts, you think about refining it. Do you want to modify this? Do you want to do some changes to it? And you keep going backwards and forwards until you've got the answers. But again, when you have this framework and you frame your prompts like this, the chances out of you narrowing in on something more valuable earlier are increased. Okay, so let's dive into some real world examples here. What I'm trying to demonstrate to you is that you can use simple basic prompts. However, if you want to save time and if you want to be more refined and you want to focus in on something that's going to be more specific and valuable, and if you want to sort of avoid going down rabbit holes and the AI going in the wrong direction, being more precise and following this framework with your prompts is going to help. Okay, so let's take this example. Imagine that you manage software developers and they've told you that they want a coding assistant tool, like let's say ChatGPT's enterprise solution, and you have a meeting the next day with leadership and you only have a couple of minutes to try and secure the funding. So one way that you could go about this, and this is just using sort of a basic prompt, is you could say something like, tell me the benefits of using ChatGPT Enterprise. And you go ahead and do that, and it's going to give you a list of things which are important bits of information, which would be quite useful. However, what you could also do is tweak your prompt so that it's going to give you a little bit more of specifically what you're after. So let's say, for example, you give it the full context that you're preparing for a 2-minute executive brief tomorrow, considering ChatGPT, etc. And basically you're asking it for a specific format. So you're saying you just want one sentence to start with, you want 3 concise bullet points, and then you want to consider the risks there, and also that you want reputable sources. Another parameter that I've put in there is that you only had 2 minutes to talk through this. So if we go ahead and try this, what it's going to do is it's going to give you something a little bit more refined and a little bit more specific to what you're after, given your scenario, right? So here you can see that it's given a plain English description, it's talked about the potential business value, risks for adoption, etc., and it's given you some sources here. So, as I said, you can go in with a regular sort of plain English prompt. However, if you do want to refine it a little bit more so that it's going to give you specifically what you're after, and if you want to sort of narrow the outputs down a little bit, it really helps to go a little bit more detail into the prompts there. Yeah, another thing you could say is the second part of this is around iterating. So if we look at this here, we can say, okay, this is good, but can you please give me more information about the developer productivity? Give me some stats to back this up. And so here, what I'm doing is I'm asking for additional information because I think that it's going to be quite important if I'm able to give some stats. And so you can see here, what it's done is it's given some details here. On average, 20% more tasks are completed quicker, etc. So look, this was just a short example, but really what I'm trying to show you here is that if you want to save time and if you want to be more precise and if you want to stop sort of going off from different angles, if you follow this kind of framework to make sure that your prompts have the right level of context and that you're iterating, you're going backwards and forwards, it's more likely that you're going to get something that's a little bit more spot on for what you're trying to achieve. So let's try another example, and this time we'll get the AI to go through and process some sales data. So imagine that you're a sales manager and you're planning for your Q1 marketing campaign and you have to present some data. And so one way you could go is you could give it quite a basic prompt and you could say, create a summary of the sales data by region and by product category. And so I've got some test data in here, which we can put in. And so if we do this, it is going to give you some information. But what might be of more use for you is if we give it a more refined prompt and we tell it specifically what we're after. So you can see with this here, it's given some key takeaways, and this is not bad. However, if you did want to refine it further, what you could is give it more details here. And so what I'm doing here is I'm giving it the data, I'm asking it specifically what I want. So I want to identify the 3 weakest product categories, and then I'm giving it more instructions around this, and I'm telling it how to present the results. And so in this instance, it might take a little bit longer to go through the instructions, but it's going to give you something that's a little bit more specific to what you're asking for. And so here you can see that there's a bit more information there, and it's provided the table in the way that you had asked for it. So again, you can go with normal plain language prompts, but if you really want to save time and if you really want to make sure that you're heading in the right direction of your prompts, it's always better to use this kind of framework to make sure that you are organizing your prompts and writing your prompts in a way that the AI is going to be able to process it better. So now I'm going to give you some additional extra for expert tips that I use all the time to help with efficiency and making sure that my prompts are more effective. So the first thing I want to talk about is it's important to make sure you force the AI into telling you when it's going in the wrong direction or when you feel that it's going off track. So one of the most frustrating things is when you're going backwards and forwards with the AI and you just feel that it's not giving you the answers that you need. It's important to recognize these points. And so I will recognize this. And there's two things that I would typically do. The first, I'm going to ask it for references. So I'm going to say if it's heading off in a different direction, please provide references to show you that what you're talking about is what I'm talking about. And then the second, sometimes you need to give the AI a little bit of an out. And, because it's sort of spun its wheels and it's head off in a different direction. And so sometimes what I do is I question it and I say, is this really the most effective way that we could do this? Could we consider doing this some other way? And often, much to my relief, it turns around and says, you know what, yes, let's try a different source, or yes, you might actually want to use a different tool for this. So giving it an out when you feel that it's going in the wrong direction and identifying when you're spinning your wheels quickly is something that I do all the time, and I highly recommend that as well. Another effective thing I get it to do is when I give it a prompt, I get it to play back to me what it thinks that I'm asking for. So this is sort of like a self-check for myself to make sure that the prompt I have written actually makes sense to it. And it's always interesting to see what it comes back with, because sometimes it can be quite off. Other times there could just be key parts where it's off. For example, it might be giving you the wrong kind of references, or it could be looking at a different sort of category of product, or things like that. So it's really effective to just sort of say, play back please what you think that I'm asking for, and then tweak before you invest more time in going down a rabbit hole, etc. Another thing that you can do is when you're getting responses and you really don't get what this is all about, you can ask the AI, what about this prompt made you think that this is what I'm after? What I'm really after is this, etc. So sort of questioning about what was wrong about the prompt can also help you adjust them quickly so that you don't continue to go down these rabbit holes. And then the last thing that I do sometimes is when I struggle to get the words out, I will record myself on my phone and I'll do a long stream of conscience. And then what I'll do is I'll take the transcript from that and I'll put it into AI and say, this is what I've been thinking. Can you please help refine and organize my thoughts a little bit more here? And then from there, once you've got them organized, you can write another prompt that makes a bit more sense. But one of the key things that you have to remember here is that AI isn't magic, and you do need to learn how to interact with it properly. You also do need to recognize that it's an iterative process, right? And so the information that it gives you the first time around isn't necessarily going to be completely right, and you should know that you should go backwards and forwards. But if you can apply this sort of framework and you can be more specific, and you know from the start that you need to check, and you keep your eye out for when you feel like you're going in a direction and you need to pivot, keeping these things in mind is going to help you be a bit more efficient and effective. But in reality, this takes practice, right? And it's not just you who's learning how to do this, it's the whole world. We're all learning at the same time how to get better at prompting. And the other thing is the technology continues to increase as well and get better. So practice makes perfect, and continue. But if you have these level of detail and the checking in mind, you're going to end up with hopefully better results. So if you've liked this video, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And also remember that this is part of the QAI for Business series, which I've created, and which is based on the QAI for Business framework that I've also created, which you can download in the link below. And so that framework there is for if you're leading AI transformation, or if you're a leader in a company and you're trying to get AI working for your company. The framework there helps you go through the different steps for creating your strategy, your project planning, your implementation, planning for resistance, all these kind of things. So please feel free to download that as well, and feel free to follow me, and I look forward to seeing you in another video. And also just a shout out to today's sponsor, Alexandra McCulloch. Kia ora, Alex. Thank you.